They told me this mansion was haunted, but they didn't tell me the ghost was me. For months, the villagers of Alderworth had warned me about Gallowglass Manor. They spoke of a shifting shadow that paced the upper corridors, of a faint, rhythmic scratching behind the plaster walls, and of a sudden, suffocating cold that would seize you by the throat in the dead of night. They called it the Gallowglass Ghost. But when I bought the decaying, 3-story Victorian estate at auction, I ignored their superstitions. I am Julian Finch. I restore historic homes. I deal in cedar beams, load-bearing masonry, and dry rot, not spirits. Yet, the house clearly remembered me, even if I had no memory of it. It began on a damp Tuesday morning in the locked parlor. We were stripping the ruined wainscoting and gutting the floors to lay down new oak joists. My crowbar caught on a thick, iron-reinforced floorboard beneath the window seat. With a sharp groan of metal, the wood splintered, revealing a deep, hollow cavity in the joist space. Tucked into the darkness was a small, rusted iron lockbox. I pried it open with my chisel. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from the damp. When I opened the cover, my heart stopped. Written in faded, sepia-toned ink was a signature, Julian Finch, May 21, 1926. I stared at it, a cold prickle of dread rising along my spine. The handwriting was a flawless, impossible match. The sweeping curve of the J, the sharp, mechanical cross of the T, the elegant, narrow loop of the H at the end, it was my exact signature. Not a close imitation. It was the precise, unique hand I used to sign every blueprint, every bank draft, and every contract. With trembling fingers, I flipped through the yellowed pages. The diary entries were written in a crisp, technical tone. The author described building Gallowglass Manor's secret passages, installing the hidden gears of the dumbwaiter, and designing a bricked-up room beneath the library chimney. The writer talked about his business partner, Alistair Vance, a man whose name made my stomach churn with an inexplicable, ancient hatred. Every wall in this house feels like a skin, one entry read, dated April 14, 1926. Vance watches me from the corners. He thinks I do not see the poison he slips into my tea, or the way he studies the crawlspace blue lines on my desk. If he kills me here, the house will keep my bones. But I will return. I must. The signature in the plaster will guide me back. The words felt like a physical blow. I didn't believe in reincarnation, but the evidence was mounting with terrifying speed. As the renovation continued, every room we gutted revealed a new piece of a life I didn't remember living. In the master bedroom, behind a crumbling sheet of lath and plaster, we found a hollow space. Inside was a gold pocket watch. When I clicked open the lid, my own face stared back at me from a tiny, silver nitrate photograph, dated 1925. The man in the picture wore a wool tweed jacket and a flat cap, but his eyes, wide, intense, and slightly desperate, were unmistakably mine. Then came the blueprints. Hidden inside a hollow core pillar in the kitchen, we discovered a rolled cylinder of heavy drafting paper. The drawing was an exquisite, hand-rendered cross-section of Gallowglass Manor, detailed in my distinct drafting style, down to the geometric borders and technical annotations. But it was what lay between the rooms that chilled me to the bone. Red ink lines traced a labyrinth of hidden crawl spaces running behind the fireplaces, culminating in a tiny, unlabeled square behind the library's brick chimney. Next to this hidden chamber, written in that familiar cursive, were the words, "Here lies the truth of the first Julian. Follow the signature." That night, after the crew left, the house was dead silent except for the wind rattling the leaded windows. Armed with a heavy iron wrench and a high-powered headlamp, I went to the library. I pushed aside the heavy mahogany bookshelves, exposing the raw brickwork of the chimney breast. I tapped the masonry with my hammer. Near the bottom, behind where the shelves had been, the mortar was dry and sandy. I slammed my sledgehammer into the wall. The bricks collapsed inward, revealing a pitch-black, narrow opening. A wave of musty, dry dust washed over me, smelling of century-old paper and dried timber. I knelt and crawled into the dark. The crawl space was narrow, barely wide enough for my shoulders. The joists above me were rough-hewn pine, covered in thick curtains of spider webs. As I dragged myself forward, my headlamp caught something scratched into the wooden beams. It was my signature. Over and over again, carved into the timber, Julian. 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 They were guideposts, leading me deeper into the belly of the house. I followed the ink trail and the carved signatures through the suffocating crawl space, my heart hammering against my ribs. The air grew thinner, colder. Finally, the crawl space opened into a small, windowless brick chamber behind the chimney. My headlamp beam swept across the room and froze. In the center of the room sat a dust-covered drafting desk. On it sat a heavy brass inkwell, a dried quill, and a single sheet of parchment. And on the floor next to the desk lay a pile of yellowed, fragile bones. I crept closer, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The skull was shattered at the temple, crushed by a heavy, blunt object. Scattered near the skeleton were the rusted remains of an iron pocket watch and a silver fountain pen. I looked at the parchment on the desk. The ink had long since faded to a dark brown, but the handwriting was loud and clear. To the Julian who returns, the letter began. If you are reading this, Alistair Vance has succeeded. He struck me down from behind as I finished this room, sealing me behind the chimney to rot while he claimed Gallowglass Manor as his own. He thinks my voice is silenced. But he does not know that the soul is like ink, it stains the very wood and stone of the place where it poured out. I have written my story in the bones of this house. The deed to this estate, signed in my blood and Alistair's betrayal, is hidden inside the iron hollow of the library hearth. Take it. Expose the Vance family name. Avenge the man you used to be, so that our soul may finally rest. He is coming back to brick up the wall. I hear his hammer now. May 21st, 1926. As I finished reading the letter, a sudden, crushing cold filled the chamber. The dust on the floor began to swirl, and from the narrow crawl space behind me, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. It was the heavy, rhythmic scrape of bricks being dragged across the floor. And then, the unmistakable sound of a hammer striking mortar. I scrambled back toward the opening, but the space was gone, sealed by a solid wall of fresh, wet brick that hadn't been there minutes ago. In the pitch darkness, a faint, weeping shadow began to gather over the bones on the floor, its face turning slowly to meet mine. I gripped my iron wrench, the metal cold and heavy in my hand. I was 17 years old when I first began to study old crime scenes, but I never expected the victim to be me. The loop had closed. The house had brought me back, not to live, but to face the man who had murdered me in the dark. And as the brickwork outside began to settle, I realized Alistair Vance wasn't just a ghost in the parlor. His descendants still owned the land surrounding Gallowglass Manor. And they were coming to finish the job.